tonight I'm going to be talking about how the Lord provides for us. So, at college, I'm involved in a campus ministry called Crew, and I had the opportunity to go on a 10-week summer mission trip with them to Ocean City, New Jersey. And on this trip, I got to be in community and live alongside 98 other college students for the summer. But that's not originally how I planned my summer to go. Because even though it was amazing, it's just not what I planned. So originally I was supposed to work at a camp down in Georgia, but on my spring break trip, I just felt like the Lord was calling me to go on another mission trip. And so I had to call down to the camp and tell them I was just simply not coming. And that was really hard. They were just really not happy about that one. And then I also had to call my parents and tell them, hey, I'm also not going to be home for the summer. I'm going to live in another state. Which I've done before because I went on a different mission trip, but that was only 8 weeks. So, I mean, my parents were kind of like, okay. But even though that was really hard, there was just a lot of things that went wrong. So, I was supposed to go to Hampton Beach, New Hampshire, and about 2 weeks before I was supposed to be up there, I got a call saying, hey, it's not happening. It's canceled. And that was really hard. Because in that moment, I was really sad, really disappointed, and honestly really confused. Because how could God just change my plans like that? Like, it was something I really felt like he was telling me to do, and then all of a sudden, he said, no, like, what? So the staff lady that I'd been messaging called me, and she said, hey, like, we're going to help you find another trip. So she suggested to go out west to Yellowstone, and I was like, I really would not like to do that, honestly. But I suggested, hey, Ocean City, Maryland. So she called up there, and they had no spots. So she was like, what about Ocean City, New Jersey? And I said, okay, but when she was calling them, I thought to myself, if there's no spots on this trip, I'm just not going on mission. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm not going to go. But she called back and said, hey, they have a spot for you. And I was like, okay, cool. And then she said, by the way, you have to be up there in exactly a week. You have to raise $1,000 more than you already needed. And there's 10 times more people going. And I said, okay, I'll go. But even in those first few weeks on the trip, I was so mad at God. Because why did my plans have to change? Why was I in a totally different state than I was supposed to be with 10 times more people than I was supposed to be? And where was I going to get this money from? So it just kind of reminded me of a story in the Bible about Mary and Martha. So they called to Jesus and were like, hey, our brother, he's sick. Can you come heal him? And Jesus said, yeah, I'll be on my way. But he took longer than expected, honestly. So I'm going to be reading from John 11. On his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in the loss of their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. Lord, Martha said to Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Martha answered, I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this? Yes, Lord, she replied. I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who is to come into the world. After she had said this, she went back inside and called her sister Mary aside. The teacher is here, she said, and asking for you. When Mary heard this, she got up quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not entered the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews who had been with Mary in the house, comforting her, noticed how quickly she got up and went out, they followed her, supposing that she was going to the tomb to mourn there. When Mary reached the place where Jesus was, and she saw him, she felt his feet and said, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come along her were also weeping, he was deeply moved in the spirit and troubled. Where have they laid him? He asked. Come and see, they replied, and Jesus wept. Then the Jews said, see, he loved him. But some of them said, could not he have opened his eyes of the blind man and have kept this man from dying? Jesus, once more deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid at the entrance. Take away the stone, he said. But Lord, said Martha, the sister of the dead man, by this time there is a bad odor, for he has been in there 4 days. And Jesus said, did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? So they took away the stone. Then Jesus looked up and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you would hear me always, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me. When he said this, Jesus called in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. And Jesus said to them, "Take off the clothes and let him go." So, in this, you can see that Martha and Mary are like, "Jesus, what?" Because they're obviously very upset, very confused, and very disappointed that their brother has died. But in this, Jesus was like, "I have a plan." And even though at the moment they just did not feel like trusting him, they still did, I guess. I mean, honestly, they were feeling pretty similar to how I was. Totally different situations, I know. But they were still feeling exactly the same because they were looking at the picture right in front of them rather than the big picture. Jesus has a plan for each and every one of you, and sometimes things are just not going to go our way. And it's going to be really hard and really disappointing. But when we look at the bigger picture of what Jesus has for us, it's honestly better than anything we could plan for ourselves. Because even though I was supposed to go to, camp or to New Hampshire, Ocean City was probably the best place that I could have been this summer. I met 90 wonderful people, and honestly, they're some of the best relationships that I've made. I get to go see them this weekend and next weekend. But even in the money situation, I'd raised $4,400, which is a lot of money that I do not have. But on the day that it was due, the financial man came to me and said, "Hey, you're fully funded, don't even worry about it." And that was really crazy to me. So even though my plan was different than what Jesus had planned for me, it ultimately worked out better than anything I could have hoped for. So I just kind of want to leave you with two things. One being a verse, which is Jeremiah 29:11, which I have right here. And it says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope in a future." And then the question of, where can you be trusting God to provide for you? Because even though it's really hard and you may not be able to see the bigger picture, he truly does have a plan for each of you, and he truly does have your best interest in mind. And also, he not only loves you, but he also likes you, which is just so epic. So that's all I have for you guys.